We'll now move into community presentations. We have 5 speakers this evening. Each has 5 minutes to present. The board is always interested in hearing our community presentations. I just want to remind everybody that when you're making your presentations, to please be respectful and not engage in attacking personalities or others. So without further comment, I'd like to call upon Clint Lalonde, parent, to speak to the Wi-Fi issue. Clint?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tough act to follow with all the fun. Is this on? Hello? Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I know you've heard a great many perspectives on this issue, and it's occupied a great deal of your time, so I do appreciate your willingness to have yet another Wi-Fi conversation. I'll keep this brief. My name is Clint Lalonde. I have 2 kids who attend grades 1 and 3 at Willows, where I'm also the vice chair of the Willows PAC. But I'm not here to represent my PAC. I'm here to represent my children and to add another voice to this conversation. I know you're still in the consultation phase of your Wi-Fi deliberations, but I am seeing some actions being taken in our district based on the belief that Wi-Fi is unsafe, which concern me. Actions like application procedures for schools who wish to install Wi-Fi, as was the case with Victor School, and moratoriums on router installations. I believe that actions such as these are actually barriers for our educators. Earlier this year, I set up a website called Wi-Fi in Schools to not only balance out the discussion around the possible health implications of Wi-Fi, but to also point out that removing access to Wi-Fi in our schools has some pedagogical implications, which Dr. Irvine will speak about in a moment. Indeed, wired internet connections have their own health risks as they enforce a sedentary behavior as children are forced to remain in one spot to use computers. And sedentary behavior is something that has been proven to be a health risk. But just as importantly, I believe that decisions to limit the use of Wi-Fi in schools based on health risk undermines the credibility of the public health organizations, as it runs counter to the recommendations of countless public health organizations in this country that have looked at and continue to monitor the health and safety of Wi-Fi. Health Canada, the Vancouver Island Health Authority, the BC Ministry of Health, the Alberta Ministry of Health, the Ontario Ministry of Health. Everywhere I look to find information about the health risks of Wi-Fi from organizations tasked with protecting the public's health, I find the same specific and unequivocal message that Wi-Fi is safe. Dr. Richard Stanwyck, Chief Medical Health Officer for VHAS, stated in his July 11th letter to this board that, quote, given the current scientific evidence, the consensus of public health practitioners is that the current exposure levels, these electromagnetic fields, do not constitute a threat to the health of the public. The BC Ministry of Health states on their website that there is no convincing evidence that Wi-Fi exposures constitute a threat to the health of BC residents. And Dr. Perry Kendall, the Chief Health Officer of this province, says there is a lack of evidence of any adverse health effects related to Wi-Fi, and Wi-Fi exposure constitutes only a small fraction of total radio frequency exposure. In their August 2012 fact sheet, Wi-Fi in Schools, the Office of the Chief Medical Health Officer for the province of Alberta states that, quote, Wi-Fi in schools does not pose a health risk to our students. Public Health Ontario notes that, quote, to date there is no plausible evidence that would indicate current public exposures to Wi-Fi are causing adverse effects on health. Health Canada states that no precautionary measures are needed since RF energy exposure levels from Wi-Fi are typically well below Canadian and international safety levels. The list goes on. In order for me to believe that Wi-Fi is unsafe, I need to discredit the opinions of not one, but a whole host of very credible public health agencies. I'm not ready to do this. Indeed, I think the complexity of this issue, both the science and the political complexity of this issue, is exactly when and why we need to pay attention to public health officials to help us understand what is and is not valid information. Last week I sat in on the presentations of Dr. Blank, Dr. Gustav, and others, and at the end I heard one of the trustees remark that, quote, the research is hard to understand because I am not a physicist, unquote. I agree. I do not think that analyzing the validity of science in this matter is a role for the school district trustees. Analyzing science to find the truth is a rabbit hole we should not go down, yet it is one that I see us, all of us, parents, trustees, PACs, getting dragged down into. The arguments about the science of Wi-Fi and the safety of Wi-Fi are for the scientists and health officials to debate. That's their role, not ours. And the fact of the matter is, those who believe that Wi-Fi is unsafe have yet to convince our public health officials of the fact and continue to undermine the credibility of those health officials. All scientific studies are not created equal and should not be judged equally. Health officials weigh the entire body of evidence and make decisions. According to the World Health Organization, the body of evidence with respect to biological effects of non-ionizing radiation numbers over 25,000 studies and goes back 30 years. The evidence that is circulated by anti-Wi-Fi activists is not unknown to our public health officials. It makes up that body of evidence, which is why meta-analysis, which is a systematic review of the entire body of scientific evidence, and not single studies, are so important. This is what public health agencies do. It's their role in our society to make informed decisions from complicated bodies of work and provide consultation to other public bodies like yourself. I would like to ask the board that whenever debates about the safety of Wi-Fi are conducted, you take a very proactive approach and engage deeply with our public health officials to help you determine the validity of the claims you are hearing. While I appreciate that you did reach out to Dr. Stanwyck, I don't think that's enough. For example, there's been much criticism of Canada's Safety Code 6. Yet when I review the Wi-Fi committee meetings, I see no mention that the committee has asked Health Canada to respond to those criticisms. Ask our public health officials for their opinion about Dr. Blank's bioinitiative report, and whether the conclusions of that report are consistent with the other 32 international expert groups who have examined the health effects of RF exposure. When you review a new position paper from the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, please seek guidance from our public health officials as to whether or not this is a credible source of information. Ask our public health officials why IARC classified RF as a Class 2B possible carcinogen, and whether that classification has anything to do with Wi-Fi.
Mr. Lalonde, if you can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In conclusion, thank you. As a parent, we live in a world that constantly tells us that our children are in danger, that we're unsafe, and unless we follow a certain path, we put our children at risk. I feel there's a great deal of fear, uncertainty, and doubt being raised by anti-Wi-Fi advocates that is simply not supported by our public health officials. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lalonde. I'd like to now call upon Dr. Valerie Irvine, also a parent in the district, and she too will be speaking about Wi-Fi. Thank you.
Okay, so I thought I'd start my 5 minutes, I didn't have a time limit. Talk about fixed design for learning and versus free, which is what Wi-Fi enables in our classrooms. My children are in grade 1 and in grade 4 in your district, and I'm here to represent them. I am a professor in education and educational technology up at UVic, co-director of the Technology Integration and Evaluation Research Lab, which I believe someone's going to accuse me of conflict of interest because I've had Canada Foundation for Innovation funds and BC Knowledge Development funds, government, provincial, and federal funding to investigate educational technology in teaching and learning. Seed funds include discounts from TELUS and discounts from Dell and discounts and that kind of thing from others, which count as seed. So I'm going to get accused of being aligned in corporate mindset, but whatever. So just want to give the point back before it gets hit. So this is our 19th century classroom. We all know it. And it's actually been interesting. I've seen some of the desks around in Vancouver still. We have it as an interesting artifact. It is it's the industrial model of education. This is what we're trying to move away from, where we've had teacher-centered, lines, rows, that kind of thing. This cartoon, to me, it's kind of a fun piece. It represents the push and pull between 21st century learning and the industrial model. I expect you all to be independent, innovative, critical thinkers who will do exactly as I say. So we have them all in rows, following what the teacher's doing. We do not want this, and nor do we promote this in our schools. But yet, we have that push and pull. Our 20th century classroom hasn't differed a lot from that 19th century model. We still have the desks. Unfortunately, they're not so much in rows. We are focusing more on student-centered. When the computers came into schools, we created computer labs. The collaboration that goes on is with the student immediately on your right and the student immediately on your left. You don't get up and move and bring your desktop and your big monitor with you to collaborate and think, pair, share, and do all the wonderful things that we know how we can do in a classroom. My daughter, actually I can't click on this, but anyway, I have a sound bite there that you can listen to, and you have links to it using that handout that I provided. Looked at this picture, 9-year-old, and she said, why on earth would they wire a laptop? It's fundamentally against the affordance that this provides. The affordance provides mobility. This kind of thing is where we're doing this, but this is not what Wi-Fi and mobile devices can do for our teaching and learning. Even using the iPads, it's the same thing. Where you might want to do this occasionally for a personal learning journal, we don't want to have the continued sitting in rows, sitting in lines, and doing something one-to-one and drills and that kind of thing. I encourage you to look at the media gallery of Deirdre Bailey, a Calgary teacher and a leader, and there's many, many, many teachers like her who take photos of their classrooms and share what they're doing. They share the innovation going on. She has a furniture-less classroom, and if you look around the room, there's students with papers, there's students with pens, there's students on chairs, there's students off camera at desks and tables. The gray things around there laying on the floor are iPads. They pick them up, they go to the gym, they go outside to the garden, they connect with the world. This is what you call a mobile classroom. It requires Wi-Fi. This is a 21st century learning environment. Canada Parks has a monster map for them. They use QR codes to read them, and from there pop out videos, pop out links to websites that they can go to. They can create their own, instead of sort of the two-dimensional poster boards, which my child makes in elementary school. She connected hers up with augmented reality into videos for science experiments and things, but she couldn't play it in her classroom. She knows she's not allowed to bring her device, her iPod Touch, to her school. Besides, it would be rendered useless. There's no Wi-Fi. Again, more pictures. This is what we want to support. This is the next stage for our teaching and learning for our classrooms. It's personalization. So pictures speak 1,000 words. And I'd like to show you that this is not what I want to see in my daughter's school district. This is what I'm hearing. This is what I see dominating in what's going on in the schools. I'm tired of it. I call it professional neglect. This is what we do in higher education. It's collaborative, it's group-based. We have the technology tool there when they need it. The on and off switches I disagree with as well, because it continues the teacher-centered classroom. We want the student to be able to access worldwide and global resources when they need it, and to pick it up when they need it, and put it down when they don't. I was part of a tour with the Ministry of Education as a superintendent of learning, leading this change for personalization in our province. The Gulf Islands superintendent who's leaving to start a private school in your backyard on 4th Street in September to support 21st century learning. Go to learningstorm.org. Frankly, if I had the funds, I would be leaving your school district now. I would be taking my child to the private schools that have Wi-Fi and support this stuff. I really think that's wrong. I think you should be supporting this in your schools. On Salt Spring, they support personalization of learning at the primary level. This is a powerful picture. And basically, you give these children access to Wi-Fi, they can actually do further personalization. Instead of the worksheets that we do, which research shows creates anxiety in our students, and it's poor, poor learning design. I wake up on Saturday morning, my daughter has her iPod Touch, and she's doing math. Kindergarten, she's doing multiplication. It's personalized. She's able to advance her learning without dependent on me and without being dependent on her teacher. This is what the affordances are.
Dr. Irvine, you can
Time?
type up.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, that was basically my last picture. Those are my daughters. That's when they were 4 and 6. And like I said, I'm here to represent them. If it's a conflict of interest for me to be a mother bear, here to want the best learning for my children, when I've traveled globally and I've visited various schools and I've seen what can be done and what's not being done here. And I'm tired of elementary schools getting the shaft because, frankly, she needs access to that, and reassembling the building blocks is risky, but we are risking irrelevance. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Irvine. I'd now like to call upon David Leach, another parent in the district, also to speak on the issue of Wi-Fi.
Thank you. My name is David Leach. I'm also the director of the Technology and Society program at UVic, and as was mentioned, a parent with a son in grade 1 and a daughter in kindergarten at Willows Elementary. I appreciate all the time you spent on this difficult issue already. I learned about it just last March when I saw a poster near Willows from the group Citizens for Safe Technology that read, "Wi-Fi in schools, is it safe?" My son read the fine print and asked, "Why does Wi-Fi make you sick?" Now my question is, why are people telling my kids that Wi-Fi will make them sick? You've heard from Clint already about the scientific and public health consensus around the safety of Wi-Fi internet. You've heard from Valerie about the educational benefits of mobile internet over fixed access. Now I want to address a few concerns that you may still have that's holding back your decision. One of the main arguments I've heard from opponents of wireless internet is the precautionary principle. Because we can rarely know or reduce by 100% the potential risks associated with new technologies, we establish and enforce research-based limits for public safety as more evidence is gathered. That makes perfect sense. The fact is, though, that the precautionary principle is already implemented in the Wi-Fi guidelines and exposure limits set by the World Health Organization, Health Canada, and other public health bodies. Well, wouldn't it be better then to set even lower limits or avoid Wi-Fi entirely? The answer is no. Instead of supporting the precautionary principle, you undermine it. You call into question the legitimacy of the scientists, the doctors, and public health officials who have distilled a deep body of research into our safety protocols. You say, we know better than you do. A World Health Organization report specifically warns that, quote, "Scientific assessments of risk and science-based exposure limits should not be undermined by the adoption of arbitrary cautionary approaches." Yes, you can always find dissenting research to worry non-experts. Give me 15 minutes now and a Wi-Fi connection. I will dig up studies or experts to scare you about every technology in your classroom, or in this room for this matter, from your chairs, the crayons, to the vehicles for school trips. That doesn't mean we should ban these technologies. As with Wi-Fi, the precautionary principle is already in effect. We accept the minimized risks in exchange for the many rewards. Okay, well, if Wi-Fi is safe in general, what about individuals prone to so-called electromagnetic hypersensitivity, or EHS? Obviously, you must support the health concerns of all staff and students. However, repeated studies show no evidence of a cause and effect link between reported symptoms and exposure to electromagnetic fields from Wi-Fi. So withholding an educational tool, let alone investing in Wi-Fi-free schools due to EHS makes no sense from a scientific, medical, or precautionary perspective. What has been demonstrated, however, is how symptoms of EHS can be caused, not by Wi-Fi, but by exposure to media reports about the dangers of Wi-Fi. This phenomenon is called the nocebo effect. It's the reverse of the placebo effect. With placebos, as you know, a sugar pill instead of medicine can have a positive health outcome through psychosomatic influence of mind over body. With this nocebo effect, simply believing something can have a negative health effect and can trigger symptoms, even if the imagined cause isn't actually present. German and British researchers had test subjects watch a notoriously inaccurate documentary about the health effects of Wi-Fi. Afterwards, test subjects were told they were being exposed to Wi-Fi, even though they weren't. Many reported EHS symptoms. 2 dropped out of the study because they felt so sick. Then I mentioned the nocebo effect because it's a reminder that wireless internet is an issue in which inaction is an action. It can have unintended consequences if you allow the unfounded myth to spread through our schools that invisible waves are making our kids sick. If you let this happen, you will have sick kids and sick staff, but it will have nothing to do with Wi-Fi and everything to do with a failure to act. But don't take my word for that, and don't take the word of the vocal minority invested in promoting the dangers of Wi-Fi. Take the word of the world's public health officials and the vast majority of independent scientific researchers who have established both the safety of and also the safe guidelines for the use of wireless internet, and then make a decision. Because the next time my son sees a poster at a school and asks me if Wi-Fi is safe, I want to be able to tell him, yes, the World Health Organization says it's safe. The American Cancer Society says it's safe. Health Canada says it's safe. BC's Provincial Health Officer says it's safe. The Vancouver Island Health Authority says it's safe. And now your own school board says it's safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just for the first three presenters, because they haven't been to the board before to make presentations, just no decisions have been made. We're waiting for recommendations from the Victoria Confederation Parents Advisory Council, and just watch for when the meetings will be, when the board discusses the recommendations and decisions. I'd like to now call on Karen Lees, who will be discussing bullying. Karen, thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. I'm speaking on bullying, which I really wish I didn't have to be. I'll have a handout for you afterwards. Bullying may be overt with resulting physical and psychological harm that stays with the individual for their entire life. Or it may be subtle, such as making mocking or disrespectful comments, eye-rolling, smirking, or negating laughing at an individual's personal life experience. Whatever form bullying takes, it often results in those involved becoming less respectful and empathetic. These are two qualities essential to any mature and sensitive dialogue. The current SD 61 Discrimination Policy 4303 states, as students learn by example, all members of the school community should model respectful conduct regardless of perceived differences and should refuse to tolerate any form of discrimination. And discrimination includes any behavior that is known or reasonably should be known to be offensive. The board does not and shall not tolerate any conduct of discrimination toward any individual or group. Unfortunately, the Wi-Fi in school issue has become an area where disrespectful and bullying behavior continues to take place. I will distribute to the board a list of some examples of the social media language being posted or retweeted by some pro-Wi-Fi advocates to describe people concerned about Wi-Fi in schools. Only a few samples are, maybe we should have Wi-Fi activism days. Wear tinfoil to show respect, or sorry, to show support. Thank heavens ignorance and superstition is not acquired via osmosis. Parent extremists are hijacking the school district. Nut bars, trolls. This could be a pseudoscience drinking game. Ridiculous. A nutter at the pack asked me to turn my cell to airplane mode. Tinfoil hats are mandatory. Hashtag WTF. Hashtag zero credibility. We won't have a sci-fi future if the Luddites win. In response to Trustee Deborah Norris' Times columnist letter to the editor, a response was put up, tinfoil alert, followed by, had she used a laptop or iPad? Hashtag rolling my eyes, and hashtag who not to vote for in SD 61. Followed by, I need to encourage a board with sense to open here. Hashtag fail. In reference to people with EHS, more likely to be mental illness. And after someone posted, ridicule is counterproductive, the response was, I met some of the activists. They are ridicule worthy. That makes me mad. The very tone used in the discussion of this topic makes those suffering with EHS feel disrespected along with their families that support them. As you have heard, even trustees are not immune. As this board has heard before, my son is medically diagnosed as extremely electrohypersensitive. At one point before we figured this all out, my son was suffering so much with his symptoms that he was suicidal. Now try and imagine yourself in his place or any other student or adult with EHS. Reports are occurring regularly of EHS sufferers around the world committing suicide. When word got out at my son's high school that he was sensitive to RF radiation, a few kids started taunting him, not only with hurtful words and ridiculing actions, but also by the very thing that he is sensitive to. They would wave their phones at him and ask if he could feel it, if it hurt him, while laughing all the while. I will share a personal example and ask how the nocebo effect can explain the following outcomes. While reducing RF exposure in our home and removing Wi-Fi for our son's benefit, my constant, serious heart palpitations practically ceased. I had been seeing a cardiologist for years and was on heart medication. It became very clear that if I'm around Wi-Fi routers for any length of time, I get heart palpitations. I received a medical diagnosis myself of EHS. My office at Camosun College is quite a distance from the closest Wi-Fi access point, so I am able to function without it affecting my heart. In 2011, I suddenly started having severe palpitations when in my office. This was witnessed by all of my coworkers. On the third consecutive day of this, and after my IT department ruled out transmitter changes, I set out with the aid of an RF meter to track down the source. I was led to a nursing lab right above my office. I inquired of a nursing instructor if there had been any recent additions of any wireless devices in the nursing area. She was very excited to show me some newly acquired and top secret equipment. It was Mediman, the Wi-Fi enabled nursing dummy that would emit his vital stats and symptoms to the nursing students wirelessly. I informed the instructor that I was made aware of the new wireless equipment because my heart palpitations indicated the location. The dummy was moved to a different lab and my heart palpitations stopped. Luckily in this case, my HR department did not need to get involved to accommodate my EHS as per the Canadian Human Rights Commission, which they have made a standing agreement to do so. This week, international media has reported on the findings of a high school biology experiment in Denmark, devised by grade 9 students who suspected the Wi-Fi in their classrooms was causing concentration difficulties. They exposed half of their Cresties to Wi-Fi radiation.
Karen?
Last paragraph. Okay. The Wi-Fi exposed seeds did not grow. They were mutated or dead. The unexposed seeds were healthy and thriving. As far as the nocebo effect, obviously, this does not come into effect when considering scientifically proven biological effects on things like bacteria, molecules, cells, organs, mice, because consciously, they don't care. To insinuate that ESS is a psychological in nature is misleading, offensive, dismissive, and discriminatory. I request that everyone involved have some civilized consideration when it comes to this topic. These are real people, and they deserve empathy and respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I'm just going to make a comment, which we don't usually do, but I'm not sure how we can affect the change on social media. Our policy, if you've got examples that it's existing on our sites, then we may be able to do something about it, but when it's out there and individuals, you know, are using their own, we don't have authority, but we certainly would be interested if it is happening within our district network. I'd like to now call on Peter, and I will comment on the creativity of the titles of your speaking things, because we're all talking about Wi-Fi tonight, even though we have a limit of 3 speakers to 1 issue. So that has been noted. And Peter, please.
Thank you. As members of this Board of Education and district administrators, the workings of our school district fall onto your hands, leaving you each accountable for decision-making in this district, which must be made with due diligence and with a genuine regard for the welfare of students and employees in our schools. The assurance of a safe learning and working environment is the ultimate responsibility of each of you, and in order to ensure this, decision-making must be made free of all conflicts of interest. There is evidence of conflicts of interest in the decision-making and implementation in the use of wireless technologies in this district locally, beyond Health Canada and as high up as the World Health Organization. As elected officials, you are accountable to our school and community and to the public, and it is therefore imperative that you be aware of any and all potential conflicts of interest, especially where there are confirmed or potential risks to those in our school community. I ask you all, has our district or anyone in our district received any perks or incentives for the implementation of Wi-Fi or purchasing of Wi-Fi products, either perceived incentives or otherwise? If you don't know the answer to this question, I ask you, for the sake of transparency and due diligence, to find out the answers and report back to the next board meeting. Given the district Wi-Fi committee doesn't appear to be making the decision as per the safety of Wi-Fi or any other given wireless technologies being promoted in the school, but rather deciding on the implementation process itself, who will be held accountable for the decisions of which health has already been affected in both the student and teacher population in our district, as well as accountability for all future resulting negative health effects. Hopefully, BC PAC will learn more about the conflicts of interest related to those parents locally promoting the use of Wi-Fi before adding further members to the Wi-Fi subcommittee, which is set to provide final contribution to the Wi-Fi committee, so that BC PAC doesn't compromise their own conflicts of interest policies. To not address these conflicts or perceived conflicts would be to deny the assurance that decisions made around Wi-Fi were made fairly and in the interest of students. As time is limited, I'm formally requesting my position on the next board meeting to specifically address the documented conflicts of interest from our health authorities, both locally and worldwide. In the meantime, I'm requesting that all members of the Board of Education research further themselves now that you know that there are conflicts that do exist. Knowledge of these issues exist at all mean that you cannot deny awareness. I ask you if insurance companies, at least one of which has funded their own independent research, is denying coverage for health effects from wireless technology, how can you assure us that it's safe enough to expose our school communities to it? Saying it's ubiquitous is not an excuse for increasing exposure to potential and confirmed risks. I once again am informing you that I have not given you consent to take these risks with my child. I will follow up with a phone call to the board office tomorrow to confirm that I'm on the next board meeting agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And that concludes the community presentations for this evening. Moving on to trustee reports, I'd like to call upon trustee Horseman first, please.
Thank you. I wanted to report